bang on time again. Declan, the man from SEAI. How are you?
Connor.
That's it.
Yeah, that's the way you go.
There you go. And you're up. That's that one there.
Okay. Thanks, Connor. And I'd like to congratulate Pat on his presentation there. And I think I heard a father of the groom coming on at a wedding saying after a speech that he had heard that blew everybody away. He said, I feel a little bit like a mosquito at a nudist colony. Now I don't know where to start. But what I'd like to start with, because Pat started with his family, and it struck me today. Today is my son's birthday. He's 12 years old today. But today, in a couple of weeks' time, I'll be 10 years in SEAI. And some of the family that I've grown with over that 10 years are actually here in the room. And I want to take you back those 10 years to tell you the story of ISO 50001 before I get into John's presentation, who just unfortunately can't be with us today because of a bereavement, but obviously is at the heart and minds of the 50001. Where did this come from? Where did the standards come from? And just before I was due to join SEAI, the then minister at the time, Minister McCreevy, decided that there was going to be a carbon tax. And how are we going to deal with certifying people that would make energy savings for the carbon tax and actually be certified for that? And the industry department in SEAI were charged with looking at, could we develop a standard? And we went out and looked at what were the standards available around Europe at the moment. And there was two. There was a Swedish one and a Danish one. And the first member to come on board in terms of the family was Brendan Thorne, across the way in Aughanish. So we said we'd start with the biggest energy user and see if it worked there, then it could probably work anywhere else. And Brendan put in the Danish standard, and we saw, yes, there's a benefit. And we started to partner with other members of the family, the two Martins in Cork and Pfizer, and the plants down there, partners in Intel. We grew the family, and we started to look at, could we develop an Irish standard? So it started that 10 years ago in terms of looking at the Irish standard. It was the fastest standard ever developed, IS 393, which was then implemented in I'm just looking at it here, in terms of 2004, 2005 was 393. 2006 then, actually another momentous occasion in my family, and my daughter was born on the day we launched the agreements program within SEAI. So I was down with Minister Dempsey at the time then with the first group of companies that certified that they would implement the standard, 10 companies, within 18 months or 2 years, and that they would have the first year looking at it, the second year implementing it, the third year deciding what will we do after that. And we launched that, and it took off from there. And then subsequently we had 16,001, because what happened with, just taking you back to the carbon tax, the night before the budget, the minister decided, effect this, no carbon tax, we won't bother with that. And we were left with developing the standard and saying, what are we going to do? And when we saw it and looked at what happened in Denmark and Sweden, companies had managed, because it had been stripped away from the carbon tax, that said there was as much benefit of keeping the standard on its own without actually having the benefit of looking at the standard itself. So we said, right, let's go with our agreements program and agree that companies could get it in. And the first person that I heard presenting like Pat did and saying that this is really good for me was the energy manager in Hines in Dundalk. Michael Cassidy, is in Estellas, another member of the team that grew with us. But Michael at the time was all completely against this. This is going to make me look like my job, I'm not doing my job right. And the MD said later on, and Michael himself said, this is now making me look like a hero. Now I'm part of the team. And the phrase that we used at the time in telling every other person in industry, this is taking energy management from the boiler room to the boardroom, which it did. That's what the standard does. And in terms of the benefit of how this has grown, it lifts it out of that level where you've techie people just talking about making changes, and it takes it into the level and into the view of the MDs and other people within the organisation. Now, in parallel to that, I've had the benefit of looking at the standard growing and how we have benefited from an industry point of view. But I've started to use, because I had a eureka moment around 2000 and 2006, when we were doing our energy, we were launching the standard, but I was looking at it in terms of how can this benefit other parts of society other than industry. And when I looked at the model of what it was, those 5 steps, commit, identify, plan, take action, review, or plan, do, check, act, and I saw it in terms of energy management, homes, small business, in industry, public sector, and even in communities and local authorities and cities. I said, this model works for everybody. And what we did with what we did in Dundalk, we developed the standard, worked with industry, but we translated it into something that would work for every member of the community. And we have it be our own energy manager for homes. And how it works simply for homes was we got a residents association to commit to it. So they were the MDs of the estate. They went around and they got the commitment of every resident in the estate to sign up a letter to the policy. So they wrote their own a letter of a policy. We worked with ESB to identify what energy they were using, and we trained them over 3 months. And we trained the Residents Association, and they went out and trained a street each. And the estate saved €50,000 in 12 months by just following that commitment, identifying what they were going to do. They set targets of 20%. They actually made an 18% saving and reviewed that. And they've been following that for the last number of years and looking at environment, water, waste, and other things. So it can be done in terms of applying it to other parts of society. So the standard is very, very powerful. And what we developed it into was Sustainable Energy Community Guidelines. And I have a group coming over from 19 different countries tomorrow to Ireland to talk about smart energy communities of the future. And all I'm talking about is structured energy management and a structured approach to this that local authorities need to follow. And that's, I'm talking about the 10 years from the growing to now. At the end of the presentation, I'll take you what I think will be the 10 years going forward from this, and where the standard and the standards that are being developed now are going to play a critical part. Because it has been a huge growth opportunity. We had a few people in a room, and to see it now what has grown today, and to see the companies that are linked to it, to have MP coming out of it over the last number of years, and to see what this has evolved into is something really excellent from an Ireland point of view. And we, as in SEAI, continually promote that, but we haven't done it on our own. This has been the family of energy representatives and champions and people that have come on board. And the phrase that I've come to use over the last while is that over time, and even on the communities programme and what we've done, and what I would say to you in terms of selling the energy management, you're putting in a mining infrastructure into the organisation that you're working with. And what we found within our communities, we never found a silver bullet, but we mined, and following structures, we found loads of little gold nuggets. And when you start to collect those gold nuggets, you actually have a huge amount to show for it at the end of it, as Pat has done. And by collecting those and presenting them to the groups every so often, this is what we found by having that mining. If you don't have that infrastructure, you will not be able to mine into your own understanding or your own organisation. But if you have a structure in place, you will. And that's how you find them. And that's what will help. And it's not a stupid question, but you ask why. Why are we using the energy? Because we've always done it that way. Why? Well, that was the standard that was set. Why? We saw it change in air changes in drugs companies, going back to the FDA in the US, going back to Department of Health here. So the stories are there in terms of case studies. So it's a very, very powerful tool, and it will only become even more powerful as cities and local authorities start to cop onto it. Just a matter of interest, anybody from a local authority here today? Not one.
Well, they were.
Well, one. But that's where the opportunity lies for the business. In local authorities of the future, in terms of planning, energy efficient design, and where it's going to go, because they haven't got onto it yet. Industry are all over this. Public sector, local authorities haven't. Some of the public sectors, you'll hear about Jared in the Naval Service, and others will, and they'll really cop on. They've taken it and shown in terms of exemplars, but there's others to follow on this. So anyway, now back to the presentation. And I'm going to go through it very quickly because, again, this is John's baby that he has delivered, grown, cultured, evolved over the last number of years. And the presentation is in 2 parts. In relation to the first one, just talking about the standards that are being developed now related to 50001, and the second part about 399 and where that has come. So it's in terms of and where it's going to. And the last piece, just a couple of minutes on SEI supports. So very quickly, and forgive me in relation to my lack of now, we used to be very close to this, but in terms of I'm keeping a watching brief on it, it's where it's going. The new guidance that have been brought out right across the board. So we now lead in a lot of the cases, but certainly in 50004, the guidance on how to implement the energy management standard has been led by Ireland, with China, US, Korea and all of the other countries following our lead, because we can show we're doing it here and this is the way to go about it. And it has taken a lot of blood, sweat and tears from John and the guys involved in terms of leading on that. The other ones will be important as well, but again, as John was explaining it to myself, all of these guidance notes will sit below 50,001. So 50,001 is the main standard, but all of these guidance will start to provide the likes of you, who are the technical people on the standards, with some more information as to what you really need to do, because the details within the standards are not enough for people like yourselves in terms of the energy management. So on audits in 50,002, on 50,006 are out setting baselines and energy performance indicators, on determining energy savings on 50,003, but the mother guidance really is 50,004. So that's the main one, but the others will then start to show you. And this is going to become important from a national point of view, because we are being now mandated by Europe in terms of setting out standards for audits and setting performance indicators for the public sector and our targets to 2020. So we're going to be becoming more and more, and selling it to the rest of Europe to say, we've got a standard for this, so you should be following it, or there's an international standard, and if we're meeting it here, then other countries, they still haven't picked up on it just yet. So there's an opportunity there in understanding these on a lot more granular detail that will allow people to get business out of this as well, in terms of developing expertise in these particular areas. So just next year, John, to give you a heads up that the next rev for 50,001 will start from next year. And it's looking at, a higher level structure. We're also looking at evolving as well an advanced diagnostic in terms of, are you a 50,001 level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4, level 5 in each of the sectors. Something that has been in planning for a number of years, but it's just about getting time and resources into that. So it's another area where, as I say it, you could fingerprint an organisation to say we're a level 5 in policy, we're a level 1 in management, we're a level 2 in it, and then you say, right, we're going to target this particular area. But again, John can present that. But looking at this already, there's an advanced working group seeking input from participating countries. What can be improved, what was missed, and what can be added that will be new. So just on 50,002, the status on that is it's published. On 50,003, it's pending publication. The FDIS is final draft international status, I think is from memory of the phone call late last night. But it's not quite on that stage yet, but pending publication. And again, it talks, so you can get a copy of the presentation later on in terms of what 50,003 is. 50,004, it's at FDIS. It's not going to go back to the group. It will be John, who is the leader on it, and the main champion. So all it is if there's any final amendment before publication, all they'll be doing is doing one minor change, but it's ready to go, basically. And it is going to have additional relevance in terms of energy efficiency design. So it's going to be linking into that and looking at large industry or large enterprise energy audit obligations in the future. 50,006 is at FDIS as well, and using baselines. So this is suite in terms of 50,015, also at FDI. So most of these are ready to go, And this last one, determination of energy savings. So how do you determine the savings? So this is the circulation document number 3, just before FDIS. So it's ready to go. So those suite of technical standards are almost there. And again, in terms of the opportunities where companies here or enterprises already have the opportunity there, that there's more guidance documents that can go. And as John said, it's not to be certified to these standards, but it's to provide additional knowledge where is needed. So the second one then is Energy Management Standard 399. So that's now published. And the way I describe it, again, how would a local authority use 50,001 and how would they use 399? These are, as we describe it as well, it's project-based. So if you have a project, you're looking at making sure that it is designed and developed to 399. So the project team are following that standard. Whereas on the management system, on the ongoing operations, you're making sure that you're following 50,001. So Pat, in designing a new wing for the 400 more, and I think the biggest challenge down there is making sure that they can all understand the local dialect if they're from 39 countries. But it's understanding, right, that now we're going to put a new plant where we'll be designing it to 399 and making sure that the designing out the inefficiencies and making sure it's ready, and once it's finished that it can be managed properly under 50,001, that's where the value of the standard is. And that's where I think the opportunity is as well, in terms of planners of the future, looking at planning designs and looking at smart cities and smart communities and designing these for the future, or retrofitting projects that they will be looking at doing it to this standard. And that's where the opportunity can come from. So the benefits means, obviously, you're knocking out the avoided energy energy consumption, so cutting it out from the beginning. So again, we know that any of the savings here, why do we have the standards in the first place? It's going to make sure that we're going to keep existing employment in the local area, reduce capital expenditure, and grow another industry. Because again, we promote a PM on this. They have been gaining business on this abroad for a number of years now, because they started early with EED in terms of building it into their processes. So there's no reason why others can't, because there's a big opportunity coming down now that this standard is launched internationally. And it's the first one, and the fact that we're growing it from home means that there's an opportunity to follow this into the EN and the 50,001 and the journey that we took with 50,001 from 393. So we reckon that this will follow the same process, and the fact that we will be able to point to Ireland having had the Irish standard and say we've done it already, so you can follow what we've done. Very simple diagram, and it was interesting because the presentation, a pre-presentation was sent to me for tomorrow on the smart communities, had exactly the same diagram in it, talking about designing out the inefficiencies before you actually build. And all that's saying is making sure, wrong idea, okay, was that from the point of view of here, that again, the savings are maximised at a low-cost design. So if you're designing, it only costs very little to make the most savings. But as you go further into the project, it gets more and more costly, and that's where we have to then start looking at grants for retrofits and others to get at the efficiencies that have been built in previously. So if we can cut this out in the beginning, in terms of communities of the future, etc., designing businesses of the future, and that's what the likes of Diageo did, in terms of their local plant, that's what we've done with Dawn and others, following the same processes, getting it at the first stage. And we did it, the very first project we did was with Wyeth down in Newbridge, which saved 56% in terms of the energy usage by designing it out from the beginning. So that's guaranteed you'll get 20 to 30% by following the standard. Designing for performance, designing for energy management, and making sure that not only are you designing that it will meet the requirements, but that you can manage it afterwards, that you're putting in the right type of metering to give you the information when you need it once the system is up and running, and making sure that you get the best return on investment, and making sure that there's step functional improvements there. So who is it for? I gave you a glimpse of that. I believe it's for anybody and everybody that's building or designing for the future. They don't know it yet, but it is, and it will be. And there, John's snapshot, football stadia such as here, airports, municipalities, not just for industry. Anybody could use this standard and will in the future. So it's, he said it's not rocket science. People will have heard me say before, George Bush's famous phrase, it's not rocket surgery. It's not without adding project risk, but it's really adding it at the beginning where it's not costly, and making sure that there's a standard approach there. What John mentioned as well is that this particular piece, that if people are looking at it in detail, it really applies to part 8 of the actual Energy 50001. So if you're focusing in terms of the project application, and as John pointed out, this arrow, so you have the management system, and if you have a project, then you come out, you follow the steps, and you go back in to the management system. So you take the project offline as such, work on it to the standard, and then you embed it back into the system in terms of how it works. It also shows that you need a team dedicated to it in terms of the energy efficient design owner. So somebody that is responsible at a senior level for the efficient design, an expert, and that they are part of the team in terms of making sure that this is not lost and left out when you actually move through the system as well. So that it's not, as often happens, is yeah, it's great, we'll design in efficient motor, we'll design in this, and then architect or somebody says, sorry, we can't afford this. Oh yeah, okay, scrap that stuff. It needs to be kept on the project table from the word go. And again, that's what the standard does. It means it's kept there, and that are you following the actual process. So, as John was saying here, it can also link, and obviously link with 9001 and 50001 input into it. So there's ongoing links, and he shows where it goes. All right, Connor. So it's linked there in terms of the Gantt chart. He just wants to show again how it fits in, looking at the projects themselves and making sure that it's part of the general activities. So that was a very quick run through in terms of 399 and the general standards. The last 2 slides or 3 slides I have was just about performance contracting. And just ask this in terms of, this is only one part of what we've done in terms of looking at moving away from the whole idea of grants. A number of people in the audience, actually just as a matter of hands up who's involved in any Better Energy Communities program, grants this year. 1, 2, 3. Okay, a few. Now, what I've seen as well here is that with the communities, that is a huge opportunity for people such as yourselves getting involved in projects, because it's doing stuff on the ground and seeing how these can get involved, bring communities on board. And by communities, it's not just about a village or a group down in Tipperary or West Clare, or it's the communities that, again, it's worthwhile looking at on the website. But from our side of it, what I'm looking at now is our sustainable energy communities, which is following a sustainable energy guideline, which is actually written in parallel to the standard, and it's saying that here is the standard for a community and how you implement it. If you follow this process, you'll get your register of opportunities and your projects, which can then be your Better Energy Communities application projects. So you create that ongoing circle of finding, not just doing projects for the sake of doing them, but actually following it in a structured way as seeing how the communities can work. But these are going to have to be, on a bigger case, financed under the frameworks and looking at energy performance contracting. So we have to look at how can we finance these. And at the moment, it's a structured program with the framework is looking at bringing all of this together to see can it work. It's looking at larger projects at the moment. But I think actually growing the smaller projects out of communities is something that we're learning as well. For example, 2 years ago when we launched the pilot on communities, we had 10 homes in Tipperary that decided to be upgraded and come together on it. This year they have 110 homes, the same project coordinator, and they organised a financing loan of 1 million that the community are signing off themselves to finance it, and so that they're able to draw it down. So they came up with their own framework and their own model in terms of the actual financing. And you're seeing these models been grown out of communities and grown from the bottom up, as opposed to stuff been imposed down from the top. But it'll work in either way. You'll meet in the middle eventually, and you'll start to see projects that are getting longer term finance benefits. And it was interesting as well, last year a lot of the leads came from local authorities, but this year businesses have copped on and they've become the communities, such as Ahanish and others that say, well, we can give some of the benefit back to the communities by helping to upgrade the school, the community centre and others by using some of our savings, matching it with a grant and getting the people in the community upgraded around our outside. So that's where they're starting to suddenly put the pieces together. And I think that's one. I was with the CEO of Tyndall the other day and saying, guys, you're missing a trick here, because in Cork, you have Energy at Cork, you have Tyndall, you have UCC, everybody's paddling their own canoe. Come together and look at a wide end project in terms of how the community could work together, and look at this on a wider basis. And it's the same with because other communities have done that and started to look at it, other local authorities, Kilkenny and some others. So when you have a willing champion to take it on board, it's a really good opportunity. So we have supports for the larger ones, where we will give technical assessments. And again, that's an opportunity where you should be mirroring that outside as well and saying, right, okay, we can start to pull the projects together. We can give some supports in terms of finance supports and looking at energy audits. But this is only priming the pump, because this has to happen and we'll have to see it happen on a longer term basis. So there's a much, much bigger opportunity out there. Again, going back to the presentation, the pre-presentation I saw yesterday, he estimated that to upgrade one of the cities is going to take about 30 billion in terms of preparing it for the future and reducing carbon dioxide use or CO2 use by 80%. Massive, massive amount of work that has to happen in the future in order in terms of meeting targets. So somebody has to design that, somebody has to do the pre-audits, somebody has to look at all of that, somebody has to certify that they're going to be designed properly in terms of the next phase. All of that work is there. So to finish, in terms of 399 is going to really help in terms of moving us to the next level. The suite of guidance documents that are coming for 50,001 will give you more detail in terms of how to get more value out of it. And SEI will continue to work on this and develop it in the future. So in terms of the 10 years hence, I talked about where we've come from. 10 years hence, I believe, one, we're going to still have most of the same buildings around the place. They're going to have to be retrofitted. And probably by 2050, we're going to have 80% of the same buildings around the place that are going to have to be retrofitted. And we're going to be retrofitting to standards that have been set now, and to models that, if we get to know them well enough, will give us a lot of business in the future. So I hope you found that interesting. Thank you.
So if the Twitter machine is anything to go by, you've all found that session very, very interesting. I'm looking forward to your questions. I mean that seriously though, folks. Those three sessions have generated by far the most Twitter comment, and although there's not many questions there's a lot of quotable quotes, so I'm hoping you're finding it useful. All right. But in terms of what we're looking forward to, I mean, I think, Declan, you've covered a lot of the history and also the possibility and the future projects as well, and Tyndall, I think, covered some of the real coalface situation in terms of the challenges as an energy manager, and I think, Mike, you covered the system support, right, in terms of pulling things together. So it just, in terms of the lessons learned, is there one, and I'll just go down the panel, is there one key thing that you'd ask people to take away today in terms of how they do it? Now maybe I'll start with Mike and then I'll go to Pat and to Declan. Just one key lesson that people should take away in terms of moving things forward for themselves.
I think
Should be on there, yeah.
Yeah, I think the one key lesson is to use the existing resources that you have in your organisation, in terms of, from the environmental or the health and safety teams, to use them if you're going for 50,001. That's the main message I would have.
Okay, Pat.
I think what's worked well for us is the management of the system. You can get tied up in resources and you can get tied up in support, but try to tailor it for the first year in terms of optimise it, lean it as much as you can. put as little as you can down on paper, but have your energy management standard in place and kind of work from there then. And that's what we've been doing for the last 3 years and trying to make this leaner and fitter.
So,
in terms of the one lesson, the power of the standard, in terms of the benefit there. And that the fundamental thing that it does is ask why. Why are we using the energy? And that's it in terms of going back to basics. And it is just not to underestimate it, and to be able to build on that is a big thing.
Absolutely. So, seeing as I'm not getting many questions from you, I'm going to throw one back out. Sorry, my apologies, Enda. Yeah, go ahead. Any more hands going?
Just a question for Peter. I just wondered, could we do something more with the energy suppliers that could provide us with more data or better data? Is there more scope for energy suppliers to provide their customers with better data or more online data, regardless of your size, that might just bridge the data gap, and then after that it's just take the time to analyse it and come up with your opportunities?
In relation to the energy suppliers, you get as much information as you need at the moment in terms of the general information, like what's going in to the plant, what's going out of the plant. It started, and I'll take it back in terms of just an experience I had with Xerox at the time. And when we were saying with the standard, well, what do you do? And we were asking the guys from Denmark, what did they go about it? And they said, it started with us just looking at what's coming in and what's going out. So what's our meter? What's our water out? But what's the meter into the site, and how many widgets are going out the door, and how many are we getting? And if they understand that, and that's coming from a utility bill, that's enough to start them. It's only once you get into the journey you start to need, well, where's the granular data that I need? And often the case, it changes in terms of them understanding where has it been used, and that's through audits and saying what they need. Like most places get 15-minute interval data. It's available there in terms of large energy users. If the meter and the general meter into the site, that's all the utility have to put in. It's down to the organisation themselves to decide what they would need to do from a sub-meter. But again, that is only with them learning where they need to start putting that. And that's a journey that they have to undergo themselves. I don't think the obligation is on the utilities. I think the opportunity might be, the opportunity might be for utilities where they're starting to now see that there is an opportunity for savings and credits for energy usage, for energy savings within an organisation, that they take more of an interest of what's happening on the other side of the meter, because all they were interested in to date was up to the meter, and that's it. Now they're starting to understand, I better start understanding what's in there, get some value out of that, and get to know the customer usage and provide some value add to them. But there's others that will be starting to chase that business as well.
Okay. Any comments from Pat or Mike on utility billing and metering?
If they could lower their prices, it'd be great. If there's anything
Yeah.
No, I think what Declan said is correct. Like just getting started, and it's a journey. Was the key word I heard there.
That's it. Okay. Now, yep. Sorry, there's another one there. Roland.
James, Raleigh and Associates. I work mainly with SMEs. Now, they're the mainstay of the economy. Maybe a 10,000 a month bill. What does the SEI do for them, or is there something that you do for them? The standard they might never get certified. It's just too expensive and too much to do, but they obviously can still save quite a bit.
What I said we did in terms of translating the standard into a language that people understand. So we translated it into what's called Energy Map, and the Energy Map is the standard light that's on our website and the steps that you follow. And then we developed it into a lighter version again for even smaller businesses, which is a six steps process. So those processes are there that they can follow. And we have our business program where we provide audits and information to numbers of businesses. But it's not easy to get them engaged. And I'm sure you'll find it yourselves in terms of getting businesses engaged. But one of the things that we said, well, can we get them into that structured management cycle? And that's what Energy Map is about. And when I was looking after the business programs and the small business program, we were trying to see, is there another way of a model? I was trying to get, for example, a hotel manager to come and sit for 3 evenings or 3 mornings over 3 months to learn about Energy Map and to follow that Energy Management Action Programme, which is the standard version. As I said, they were too busy making money in the previous years. They're too busy surviving now to come and sit to learn how to make savings. And we copped on then to an opportunity, because I was discussing it with a group up in Louth, and the guy from Foss at the time said, well, we're bringing out a jobs bridge programme. Maybe this could work. And I said, how is that? And what happened was we used 12 unemployed graduates to be the energy champions. We trained them in Energy Map. They were actually hosted by large business. So they were 2 days a week with Xerox, Heinz, the local authority, all hosted these interns. And then on 3 days, they went out on a Wednesday to the hotel, a Thursday to the baker, and a Friday to the other small business. Those 12 guys saved, gents and ladies, the 12 unemployed graduates in 3 months saved $250,000 to 45 businesses and identified opportunities of $1 million. So we've run that intern program now for other local authorities to follow that model and to start looking at it. So 12 of them, out of the 12, 4 of them got permanent jobs out of it. And in terms of using the benefit of the standard, so now we've seen, can we start pairing with other local auditors or people in areas that could start bring this message to other small businesses. So again, it was another one of the nuggets that I say we found of different ways of going about it, rather than just an audit and a report that sits on somebody's desk and does nothing.
Okay, I have one question for the audience. How many of you have comms rooms in your buildings? Just show of hands. Yeah. How many have kind of even a small data center? Yeah. Okay, well, we'd like, as this time of the day, you know, we're heading towards the end run. Joining us at our final panel session is Ray McNally, who's a facilities manager for Microsoft's data center. So I'd ask you, for all of you who put your hands up, to hang on, all right, because you might learn some nuggets about how to manage your data centers in a more energy efficient manner, and you'll certainly have the chance to ask them some questions directly. So I'm going to go for a quick 10-minute break. Have you all back at 3:30, please, sharp, and we'll get you back on time and out of here on time. Thank you very much. Okay.